Hello, I'm Nima Rajan. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the other G20 leaders held a teleconference today to try and coordinate a response to the fast-spreading coronavirus. Criticism has been growing that the world's wealthiest countries had not taken cohesive action to combat the virus or its economic impact. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Finance Minister Bill Morneau is in talks with Canadian banks, asking them to look at ways to help Canadians struggling to pay their bills. The federal government is asking banks and credit card companies to lower interest rates on Canadians that are struggling financially because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Prime Minister also said he is in talks with the United States about ensuring that the Canada-US border remains free of military presence, after reports that the US may be looking at deploying troops to the border to stop illegal border crossers. And as the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic ripples across Canada, another wave may come within a week as rent comes due. April 1st is a pressing deadline for tenants and landlords alike as the coronavirus keeps people at home and closes businesses, leaving tens of thousands of Canadians out of work. Advocacy groups for both landlords and tenants are calling on the federal and provincial governments to offer some kind of relief before April 1st. BC joined Manitoba, Nova Scotia, Ontario, Quebec, Prince Edward Island, and the Northwest Territories in banning any evictions resulting from non-payment of rent. Saskatchewan's Office of Residential Tenancies noting on its website that rents are still due. Well, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says his government is amending laws to allow police and community peace officers to levy steep fines for those who don't self-isolate as directed or are part of gatherings of more than 50 people. Premier Kenney told reporters yesterday that while most Albertans are doing their part by self-isolating and not gathering in large crowds, not everyone seems to get it. Fines could be up to $1,000 on a first offense. People returning from abroad have already been directed to self-isolate for 14 days. Well, construction on the Woodfibre LNG project southwest of Squamish, BC on the west coast has been delayed for a year due in part to effects of the pandemic. A project official says substantial construction expected to start this summer won't take place until after the middle of next year. A fabrication yard in Asia that was making components for the project was shut down to hinder the spread of the coronavirus. The official says another cause of delay is that the preferred U.S. construction contractor for the marine part of the project has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Well, the president of the Alberta Wheat Commission says Ottawa has to do more to make sure that agricultural products make it to market and onto the shelves of grocery stores across the country. Todd Hames says the industry is in uncharted territory right now and needs to be assured that grain producers can continue to provide an important commodity. Mr. Hames says that including making sure railways and the Port of Vancouver remain open for the duration of the current crisis. A number of agriculture industry leaders are calling for essential service status. Well, meanwhile, Nestle Canada is giving a temporary raise to its employees in its factories and distribution centers across the country as it deals with the COVID-19 pandemic. The food producer says the workers will receive a temporary increase of $3 per hour, retroactive to March 16th. Salaried employees in the factories who cannot work from home will also receive a bonus. It says in the event of any temporary shutdown related to COVID-19, up to 8 weeks of full pay will be provided for all hourly and salaried staff affected. Nestle has 3,200 employees in approximately 18 locations across Canada. Well, the Canadian press has learned that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is going to name Kristen Hillman as the country's next ambassador to the United States. The former deputy ambassador has been on the job on an acting basis since September after David McNaughton resigned. Ms. Hillman is a lawyer and a specialist in international trade and served as Canada's chief negotiator during trade talks with the European Union. Well, the deadline has passed for candidates to get on the ballot for the federal Conservative Party leadership race. Party members will have 4 candidates to choose from, but it's not clear how the contest will proceed given the pandemic. The candidates are Toronto lawyer Leslyn Lewis, MP Erin O'Toole, former Cabinet Minister Peter MacKay, and MP Derek Sloan. Well, worldwide infections from the coronavirus are soaring toward 500,000 people as the healthcare system struggle to keep up. American deaths have passed the 1,000 mark. Both Italy and the United States look to pass the number of infections in China, where the outbreak was first reported. Italy's initial steep rise in confirmed cases has started to level off more than 2 weeks into a nationwide lockdown. On Wednesday, the country reported 5,210 new cases and 683 deaths. The head of the World Health Organization is urging governments to slow the spread of the virus while there is still time. The U.S. Senate passed a $2.2 trillion economic rescue package, steering aid to businesses, workers, and healthcare systems, and the House is expected to vote on it on Friday. Well, China says U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo had a motive in insisting on calling COVID-19 the Wuhan virus after the city in China where it was first detected. A foreign ministry spokesman says it is an effort to stigmatize China and an attempt to divert attention and shift responsibilities. Secretary Pompeo's call for the virus to be identified as the Wuhan virus came at a virtual meeting of G7 foreign ministers and led them to opt not to release a group statement. Foreign Minister François-Philippe Champagne was also on the call. Well, nearly 3.3 million Americans applied for unemployment benefits last week, reflecting the damage that COVID-19 is inflicting on the U.S. economy. That number is more than quadruple the previous record set in 1982. And experts say the pace of layoffs is only going to accelerate as the U.S. economy sinks into a recession. Some economists say the unemployment rate could approach 13% by May, and that in the second quarter, the U.S. economy will shrink by as much as 30%. Well, Spain has become the country in Europe where the coronavirus outbreak is expanding the fastest. It's second only to the United States in the number of new cases reported. Spain's health ministry reported 8,578 new infections and 655 deaths on Thursday, bringing the total infections to 56,188 and more than 4,000 fatalities. The outbreak is straining Spain's healthcare system, with medical staff struggling to treat the infected amid a shortage of protective gear and enough ventilator machines and other medical equipment. Iraq's military says 2 rockets have hit Baghdad's heavily fortified green zone. The attack followed a brief pause in violence. Iraq's military said Thursday's rocket attack hit the Baghdad Operations Command, which is a few hundred yards away from the U.S. Embassy. An Iraqi security official said there were no casualties. The attacks come as the U.S.-led coalition had announced plans to draw down its presence in bases across Iraq and consolidate in Baghdad and another base in western Iraq. Well, some of India's people suddenly thrown out of work by a nationwide stay-at-home order have started receiving aid distribution as both the public and private sector work to curb the coronavirus pandemic. The order keeping India's 1.3 billion people at home for all but essential trips to places like supermarkets or pharmacies is meant to keep the virus cases from surging above the 553 already recorded. The measures that went into effect Wednesday risk placing further hardship on the quarter of the population who live below the poverty line and the 1.8 million who are homeless. Well, the French are waging a fight against COVID-19 one baguette at a time. The iconic loaf and the daily ritual of buying it have become loaded with moral, civic, and public health considerations. France is on lockdown, so popping out for a fresh baguette is proving a handy excuse for some people to get out of the house. But for others, not buying bread daily has become a gesture of solidarity with the doctors and nurses fighting to save lives in stressed emergency wards. Well, that'll do it for today's news update. I am Nima Rajan. Thank you for joining us today, and I'll see you next time.